In this video, we'll warm up our subdivision surface modeling skills by modeling this coffee cup. The primitive it's most similar to is a cylinder, so let's go ahead and get rid of our default cube, hit Shift-A, add mesh, and cylinder. Before we do anything, let's open up the redo panel and choose the number of vertices. I'll hit 7 to go to top view, and what we're really looking for is one face that goes along the x-axis that's about the width that we want our handle to be. So first I'll just cut this in half, and that looks like about the right size for our handle, but we don't have that one face that's going directly along the x-axis. So I could decrease this to 14, but that looks a little bit too thick for the handle, so I'll go in the opposite direction, and let's go with 18. Next, let's actually make this cylinder to be the size of a coffee cup. So I'll hit N to open up my sidebar, go to the dimensions, and let's set the X and Y values to be 8 centimeters. Coffee cups come in all different shapes and sizes, but for this one, let's make the diameter 8 centimeters and the height 8.5. Be sure to type in cm, otherwise it'll be 8.5 meters, and while I wouldn't mind that amount of coffee, I don't think it'll fit in my cupboard. Once it's scaled down to the right size, let's hit Ctrl-A and apply that scale, just so that all of our operations and modifiers work as expected. Then let's decide the shape that we want. I'll hit Tab to go into edit mode, 3 to go into face select mode, and maybe I'll make the bottom just a little bit smaller, and the top just a little bit bigger. This is where you can have fun though, and make this whatever shape that you want. We could even add an edge loop with Ctrl-R right in the middle, hit S and scale that up just a bit. But before we get too far into things, let's hollow it out. So I'll hit 3 to go to face select mode, select the top, I to inset, and give this a little bit of a lip. Then let's go to front view with 1, Z and toggle X-ray or wireframe, E to extrude. Let's extrude that along the Z axis, all the way to the middle, E to extrude again, almost all the way down, leaving a little bit of a gap, and scale that down so the curvature matches. With that done, we can toggle off X-ray and see what this looks like with a subdivision surface modifier. So I'll go to the modifiers tab, add modifier, generate, and subdivision surface, then I'll crank it up to 2. I'll hit tab to go into object mode, and this way we can inspect what we have so far. It is looking nice and smooth on the sides, but the n-gon at the bottom is definitely causing some problems, and we have too much rounding. So first let's sharpen that up. I'll hit tab to go into edit mode again, Ctrl-R, and let's add an edge loop that runs really close to the bottom edge, but leaves a little bit of a gap. Then to make an edge loop on the inside, I'll go to face select mode, select that bottom face, and hit I to inset. If we want to make the bottom a little more interesting, we can hit I to inset again, shrink that down just a bit, and then hit G and Z and move that up along the Z axis. Now the shading for the n-gon isn't too bad, and if we go to object mode, right click and shade smooth, then that actually looks fine. I don't think there's a whole lot we need to do there. But if you wanted to make this angle more extreme, then you'd probably want to use a grid fill. So I'll turn off the subdivision surface modifier for now, just so we can actually see this face, and then I'll delete this face with delete and faces, 2 to go to edge select mode, Alt left click to select the edge loop that goes all the way around, and then let's go to face and grid fill. I'll change the number of spans to 4 so that we get more of a grid and not just lines running in one direction, and then I'll hit Ctrl-7 to go to bottom view, and then change the offset until it lines up with the X and Y axes. Then let's do the same thing for the inside. I'll hit Ctrl-R and add an edge loop towards the bottom there, again leaving a little bit of a gap, then selecting that bottom face, I to inset, and this one we can leave completely flat. And if we go to object mode, turn on our subdivision surface modifier, I really don't see any issues with this n-gon down here, so I'll just leave it as is. I do want this to be sitting on the ground though, so I'll hit tab to go into edit mode, take the faces that are closest to the center of the bottom, and then go to mesh, snap, and cursor to selected. Then go to object mode, object set origin, and origin to 3D cursor, and then object, clear, and location. That way when we scale or rotate this, it'll start from the very bottom of the coffee cup. Then I'll hit tab to go back to edit mode, and let's sharpen up this top here just by adding an edge loop on the inside and the outside. Ctrl-R and Ctrl-R, slide that up, and left click to confirm. Now all we need to do is add that handle, and we need to add some edge loops to support it. So I'll add one here at the top, and another edge loop here at the bottom. If we want to continue our rounding, then we just need to Alt-Shift to select both of them, and then Alt-S to scale them out just a little bit. Then I'll take these faces and hit Control-B to split them into 2 edge loops until they're about the thickness of the handle that I want. What I'm doing here is just creating geometry so that I have these 2 faces to work with. Once I have those 2 faces, then I'll hit E to extrude and pull them out a little bit, and then I'll angle them towards each other. I'll go to X-ray view, vertex select mode, and this one I'll angle just slightly towards the other one, but I'll also extrude it pretty straight along the X-axis. I'll angle this one up just a little bit, like so. And then I can take both of these faces, turn off X-ray, right-click, and bridge faces. Now that's going to connect them straight from one to the other, which looks pretty bad initially. But one thing that's really cool about the bridge edge loops is that we can smoothly connect these if we increase the number of cuts. So I'll set that to something like 7, and you can see that the blend does not work particularly well. We could change the interpolation, but neither of these seem to work super well. So let's go ahead and Control-Z to undo that, and then just rotate this face a little bit more towards the other one so that it knows which way to blend. So let's try that again. Right-click and bridge faces, increase the number of cuts, and that time it worked perfectly. I don't need too many cuts here because the more cuts we have, the more we need to adjust, so I'll decrease that to about 4. Now this handle is looking pretty good, but it's also a bit small, so I'll go to front view here and select all the vertices that make up the top, and just hit G and Z and move those up a little bit, and select all of the ones that make up the bottom. Make sure not to select any edge loops that are on the inside of the cup, and hit G and Z and bring that down along the Z axis. Then, since we don't have too many cuts, then I can really easily adjust the shape of the handle by moving around these edge loops. So I'll stretch it out a little bit more vertically, and then I'll take all of these inside faces here, and let's go to 3 and face select mode, and then Alt-S, and scale them out a little bit just to thin out that handle. But I didn't select the ones that are directly connected to the cup, and that way I can still have a little bit of transition between the thicker and thinner parts. So if you want to adjust this, just hit Alt-S, scale along the normals, until that's about right. And if you want, you can also change the thickness of the handle just by selecting the faces on the opposite side, just like so, and then hitting S and Y. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll just give this a little bit more of a transition into the cup by selecting the edge that connects it directly, and then hitting G twice and sliding that down just a little bit. I'll take this one, double tap G, slide that up, and there we have a nice transition. Like I mentioned before, the huge benefit of subdivision surfaces is that we only need to adjust a few edges to control the overall shape. For example, here I'm not thoroughly satisfied with the shape of the handle, and so I can really easily go in here, go into X-ray view, select these vertices, and adjust this to my liking. So go ahead and shape this coffee cup to however you prefer it. And if you want a bit of a challenge before heading on to the rest of the course, try modeling a completely different coffee cup in a completely different style, and maybe adding a little saucer beneath it. Once you feel sufficiently warmed up, then head on to the next lesson.